Okay, so we're going to move on to our report section, and we'll start out with the President's report. One of the first things I'd like to say is our schedule for January. We have our regular board meeting on the second Tuesday, and we have our Committee of the Whole discussion meeting on the fourth Tuesday of the month. I would also like to say and ask the board when there are emails that are sent out that say do not reply all, that we do not reply all. If you need to send information out to all the board members, if we could filter it through the superintendent like we agreed to several years ago. Most of us in this room have been sitting here together for at least 4 years. If we could just do that. We have a section in the board meeting where we're asking if you want future agenda items and discussion items. Does anyone think that we haven't covered any of the items, or they're expecting something to be on the agenda that currently isn't? You know, please speak up now or later and let us know.
Today or to add?
You know, some people have asked to add stuff in the future, and I want to make sure that we get your items on there. You know, one of the things I'd like us to work on as we go forward into January is, you know, we're drifting a little bit away, in my opinion, of being a governing board and being a little bit more of a managing board. And so I think we can talk about that going forward in January and how we need to take that balcony eye view of what's going on and work on something like that. The consent agenda items have been put on the new business for this month, and it's not been, they haven't always been on the consent agenda item, but since we're getting a lot of questions about the bills and stuff, we might as well talk about that as new business rather than a consent agenda item, which should be something that pretty much is just a vote and shouldn't have that much detail. Last week, the business manager, the superintendent, myself, went to visit the Township Treasurer's office, and we had a good discussion with the Township Treasurer and his staff, and also in attendance were the auditors for not only the Township Treasurer's office, but also for RB. Questions that were submitted to the auditors, questions were distributed. Each of you should have had those and got those by now. And we talked a little bit about those questions with the auditors, but one of the main focuses of the meeting that we had with them was the IMET funds and how the Township Treasurer's office had wrote off 100% of the IMET funds as a loss in their audit, and the RB High School audit wrote off 53% of those same funds. And we asked them, we asked the auditors if that was appropriate. And from what I gathered, the information I was provided, the Township Treasurer himself indicated to his auditor to write off 100% of the IMET funds. And I asked him, well, how is that 100% write-off compared to when we had a guest here who told us that as of the date he was here, that RB had not lost any money? How did he reconcile those two statements? And basically he said that at the time that the guest came here and told us that we hadn't lost any money yet, that the money was in some kind of restricted account and the money was earning interest. So he felt that there was no loss at that time, and he was the one who instructed our guest to come and tell this board that we hadn't lost any money as of that date, because the money was in a restricted fund and it was earning money as usual, and he couldn't reconcile how he could say we lost money if the interest was still being paid on that money. So in the RB audit, we wrote off 53% of the funds that represented our investment in the IMET funds. And although they seemed to indicate that this wasn't a material amount compared to all of our funds, I know this board is very concerned that if we lose any money, it's a concern to this board, whether it's a material amount compared to our overall budget or not. So I asked our auditor what the plans were going forward if the Township Treasurer's Office wrote off 100% of the funds invested in IMET, and those same funds of which were for RB were only written off at 53%. He indicated that next year, if we do not receive any funds through the IMET recuperation, court cases or whatnot, that our auditor would then write off the remaining 47% of those funds on our audited financial statements for the year ending June 30th, 2016. He did indicate that anytime he gets additional information, that information is passed on to the business office, which passes it on to the superintendent, which passes it on to us. And they did indicate that they're aggressively watching and following what the result of this will be, but that they really don't know what the result will be. I asked about what happens if we do collect some funds, that if we write them off next year. And they indicated that they would, add them back as income when we did realize that money. Tim, is that pretty much the recollection?
Yes.
Okay, so that was our visit to the Township Treasurer's Office.
Can we ask questions?
You have questions?
Yeah.
Sure.
I think our auditor wrote a 50%, that's $53,000, but one of the presentations we keep getting from our auditors is one reason it's so great is they're the auditor for both and they make sure we're aligned. How can we leave it on our books, money that's the treasurer is allegedly holding it, they've written off?
And I asked them, and our auditor said he makes his determination independent of what the Township Treasurer instructed his audit to write it off in full.
Okay.
So that auditor was taking instruction from his client to write it off in full. Our auditor, who we didn't instruct to do one way or the other, said as a conservative position, his determination, as his professional opinion, is that it wasn't really 100% written off here. So I brought up that point, how can one set of books say 100% is written off when part of that money is money they're holding for RB High School, and RB High School's auditor wrote off only 53% of that amount. So that was exactly one of the questions I brought, and that was the answer I gave them. And I said, is it appropriate for two CPA auditors to take those positions? And their answer was yes.
Same. The second thing is, did you talk to them about why it takes 7 months for them to do an entry on the books that we send to them? That was another point that our auditor made, that he made some adjustments at the end of the year for the accruals, and they weren't balanced because they said they sent them to the auditor or the treasurer, and it takes sometimes 7-8 months for them to make the entry.
Well, I know that our auditors have sent all of the entries to the treasurer's office. I think they're taking them to their board, and then they said don't make those entries.
Okay.
So there was some delay because they only meet quarterly. So part of our conversation also was about efficiency and trying to get with the times of maybe developing a website so that we can see when their meeting agendas are, and maybe look at their meeting minutes and possibly look at their posted financial statements, which are all foilable documents anyways.
It
just points out again that this is an arcane patronage office.
Tim, these are our books. So you need to tell them they're our books, and they should book the journal entries when we want them booked. They're not their books. They're our ledgers.
I know, and they have the entries they're going to.
So why do they need to go in front of a board to get approval to do journal entries? They're our books. We authorize those journal entries. It doesn't matter what other boards authorize. They're our books.
We can follow up on that.
Yeah, I'll follow up.
Sure.
We have taxpayers here voting for these records, not their township people.
Okay.
And so then we moved into the kind of open books transparency type discussion where
Nice segue, Mike.
we talked about how we as a board in the last 5-7 years have brought our website up from less than desirable to more of a transparent and fully disclosed, where we put our meeting minutes on, where we put our meeting schedule on, where when we approve meeting minutes, they go up there. When we get an audit report, they go up there, and a lot of other things. And the township treasurer pretty much said it was his decision that they don't have that website at this point. But they're considering it. It's something that's on their agenda to consider. I tried to explain how when the public asks, that if they want to know about their books or what they're doing or what their loss is, if they merely put all these FOIA-able documents on the website, that might, take care of some of the questions that are coming their way for documents that would be producible under the FOIA anyway. And then they told us that they're considering this. They didn't say it was imminently coming up anytime soon, but they were considering it.
We extended
Thanks, Mike.
even to use our tech department for a reduction in fee to help them establish their website. So,
So we
Thank you.
Thank you.
We did that, and we also agreed to meet in the same format at a date to be chosen in the future. No specific schedule. So I guess I'll just stop there for my report, since we got a lot of things to still get to. Any other questions?